You're watching the She CEO podcast with Dr. Julie Ducharme, talking with female CEOs from all over the globe.
Hi, welcome to the She CEO podcast. I'm so excited to be back for another episode. For those of you who may be new listeners, this is a podcast that's all about interviewing women around the world who are owning the space as a CEO, their climbs, their struggles, all the different things they've did. This is probably what I want to say the most authentic, real podcast because we just talk about it how it is. So I'm really excited to bring in today Jacqui Bryant. Jacqui, welcome to the show.
To be here.
Well, and you were all the way from Australia. Remind me which part of Australia you're in.
I am from the beautiful city of Sydney.
Yes. So Sydney, which we got to visit there. It was very fun. I do have to say, like, I felt there was a little bit of like, it was a little bit like America. Hopefully I'm not like insulting you. But I just felt like, oh, this feels very comfortable. I just felt very comfortable and, at home there when I was visiting Sydney. So
yeah, Sydney is very much that multicultural dynamic city, and I think after going to New York, it does remind me a little bit of that vibe.
Yeah. We enjoyed it. We went to the zoo. The kids loved that they found a bookstore that had all these Japanese books in it. So we had a great time, and it was awesome to be there. And I'm so glad you're on the show today. And something I love, obviously, I'm going to let Jacqui introduce herself and everything she does because she's multi-talented. But I love to highlight that she is one of our veterans. And I love to highlight that originally, Jacqui, we only had women veterans from the US in our group. And you are the first woman veteran in Australia to be in our group. And so we're very proud to have you and very thankful for your service that you've done. Even though I'm in America, I'm thankful for every woman veteran who's done the service. So thank you so much for that. So let's talk about, what you're doing, where you started, how you ended up here to start.
Well, actually, I'll take you back even to, you probably don't normally get someone to talk about when they were born, but I was actually born 3 months early back in the 60s and was less than 2 pounds. I've always been told that she'll never make it. I was christened in hospital, so I've always been a bit of a fighter. And I think that sort of was what instilled me. I never knew where I was going to go as far as what career. So unlike maybe some of the veteran listeners today, that they always knew they were going to join the military, I was either going to be a physiotherapist, commercial artist, because I absolutely adore art, or join the Defence Force. I did work experience when I was 16 with the Army and realised that I loved the teamwork and the camaraderie, but the Army wasn't necessarily for me. And then the long shot, I applied for the Air Force, and that was when the Defence Academy was opening up in Canberra, which was one of the first tri-service military academies, and it was an academy for officer training, so similar to Colorado Springs for the Air Force over in the States. And they were smashing together basically 3 cultures. So I joined when I was 18, straight from school. And as back then you joined for basically your university degree plus a return of service obligation. So that would have been 4 years on top of my 3. And I thought, yeah, I'll do my 7 years and then I'll get out. And then I did my 7, and then I did my 10, and then I did my 15. And when my son was born, that's the time that I went, because my husband at the time was also in the military, and I knew I'd keep deploying. So I thought it's either do the service career or be mum. And for me, mum was definitely the choice I made.
That's awesome. I love that. And so, gosh, how many years was that total?
So 15 in uniform, and then I've been working in and around defence and government for the last 25 years. So the same age as my son.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so you have had a tremendous experience in that. So when you transitioned out and became a mom and started working outside of that, what were some of the areas that you started to dive into?
So to be quite honest, when I was getting out, I didn't want to work for defence. I was seen at that stage, there was a lot of changes going on, and being a senior leader, it was some decisions that you totally agreed with and could see that that was the right direction. Others I struggled with at times. I've always come back to centre and gone, well, I can't, particularly in a leadership role, I can't be a hypocrite.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of one of those things that I decided, well, I could agree and say and lie, which it doesn't sort of fit in, particularly when one of the values of the military is integrity. And so I basically got out. But then my son was 3 months old, and I got a phone call saying, we need you. Can you come back consulting? So I was sort of a bit of the boomerang. I think it was because of the skills that I had and was niche skills, and that at that stage there was a lot of outsourcing. We were redirecting people in uniform to core warfighting activities. So things like contracts, which is something that I sort of had in my background as a logistics officer, sort of just was a natural progression, and I just carried that out. So it was basically doing my old job but without the uniform.
Did you see a big difference? Was it better being out and getting to be a consultant side of it?
It's even to this day, 25 years on, it's fascinating to watch how people sort of go and I think approach you, because on some cases they'll go, oh, and this is the term that they use, you're a dirty, rotten, filthy contractor. That they sort of say that you basically take off your watch and then they charge you by the minute. So it does get a pretty poor rap, which for some of the people out there, I can understand why it does. And then it sort of then felt, well, yes, I've taken the uniform off, but I still bleed blue as far as from an Air Force perspective, and I genuinely care about the outcomes of defence. So from that perspective, it felt strange that in some rooms my experience was looked up to and valued, and in others I was discounted because I had taken the uniform off. And I did actually find that some of my biggest struggles were actually female public servants, that they were the ones that wanted to tear you down, because when you walked into those rooms, and defence is very much a community, and once you've worn a uniform, you've always worn a uniform, and you know people. And as soon as they knew that you had connections to them, it could be a threat. And some of them would go into that ability of going, well, I'm going to actually, she could expose me, so let's get rid of the person that can expose me. And they were controlling the re-engagement of consultants. So navigating that has been a fascinating journey, and I've watched it change time and time again, depending on who's in the chair, depending on which room, because it's not just Air Force work that I've done. I've worked at Navy and Army and Tri-Service. So it has been, and the Defence Equity Organisation as well. So it has been a fascinating journey.
So I've heard this across the line from several military women in the U.S., Ireland. And so I find this interesting. And of course, with She Talks, we're all about creating collaboration versus competition. And so what I find is really interesting is, obviously you're seeing this in military, we're seeing this in corporate, we're seeing this in a lot of spaces. From your experience, dealing with these women who you're saying a lot of them were the ones giving you the toughest time, right? Instead of being like, hey, this is awesome, I'm so glad you're here, let's work together. Do you find that is like from the culture? Do you find it's like something that is pushed in, for women to behave that way? Like, why do you think that these women are so anti other women?
I think it's the military's always been, particularly the women in uniform have been very supportive of each other, particularly when you're at the sort of the forefront, and because we have had to do a lot of sort of, I guess, that traditional word of breaking glass ceilings. When I joined, it was even the stage that same-sex relationships, like it was a chargeable offence and you'd be discharged from the military it was when there was still a lot of operational roles that weren't open to women. And when you look at that, they were used to going through that sort of not proving their ability, but to be able to open up doors for others. So that was built into our tapestry. When it comes to the public service, none of them have, there's very few that have actually, they're ex-service, particularly at that sort of level. Most of them have joined through the public service, and that they'll move from department to department. It was even fascinating. One of the women that I did have the issue with, she had like stickers all over a car which were very anti-defence, and you go, well, there's plenty of other roles out there, why pick defence? But defence is always seen as a sort of the jewel in the crown from that role, because they can get promoted quite well. There's the potential for travel. But in terms of getting back to your question as to why, culturally it's been very much an us and them. And there was, back when there was a defence reform program that sort of happened here, which is like any of the major reorganisational programs, it was tipping the balance between, in the support roles, the number of public servants versus those in uniform. And whereas before there was predominantly military, it's switched to predominantly public service. And even though it espouses the same values, it's not quite the same, because they're not the ones that can get a 2-minute warning to deploy, or they're on 24/7. Public servants are very much controlled by their union, and which the military doesn't have a union. So there are abilities that they can reinforce the option. They haven't had necessarily the choices taken away from them, which when you sign on the dotted line on the military, you're signing over to everybody, really. So I think from that perspective, there is a bit of a culture push, and with the numbers, they tend to then group, and it becomes the tribe. You're either in their tribe, and if they like you, and they'll bring you in. If they don't, it's basically, well, let's see how long we can take, and they'll go and do all the politicking. They'll smile sweetly to your face, and then they go politicking in the corridors. And the words that you hear afterwards, there was quite recently that I even heard them saying, "Oh, isn't the dynamic different now that Jacqui's left?" And so it even continues afterwards, and you're going, why? What's the point of this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and obviously, we're trying to change that cultural paradigm. And I know that there's some cultures that we're never, I don't want to say never, but it's always going to be difficult because of the culture and the behavior, and really the building of that culture that may not really shift 100%. But I know that you're doing more than just general contracting. And so I want to talk about that as well. And I know for many of our women, we have a lot of women who have done a career for 20, 30 years, and now they're transitioning into a new career, or they're looking at something new. And so I think this is really important for women to hear this, because I mean, as they say, you are not a one-trick pony, you have several skills. And so I'd love to talk about the other passion of what you're currently working on.
I think I've always pushed, I've always felt that I'm a bit of the yin and yang, and the bringing in the masculine and the feminine. People, if they sort of see me, they go, "Were you in the military?" And go, yes, I was. And but I've always felt like there was this internal conflict between sort of the right brain and the left brain, the black and the white, in terms of the contracting, because it can be very black and white. But even approaching contracts, it was always about the relationship that underpinned it. It was always about that trust. It was always out bringing, how can we see both sides and look at how we can work collaboratively to get the same outcome. Whereas a lot of people, when they've gone into, say, the contracting space, it was very binary thinking. It was a win-lose. There was always that struggle. And that's translated into any system. I mean, I've been inside a system for 40 odd years in defence. You're in a system with your family system. I'm seeing what's happening with the veterans now with housing, and the amount of homelessness in our veteran community in
Mm.
Australia is on the rise. The
Yeah.
same as PTSD, which would be similar in the States and
Oh, yeah.
in countries.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what I'm really passionate about is, because I've been inside the system, I've been outside the system, I've been collateral damage at times. And I've obviously been a leader in these systems, is to go, there's got to be a better way. So what I'm now passionate about is actually demonstrating or highlighting where the whole, because I think in most of these institutions and systems, everyone's looking at it in silos, or they use the term, it's the pillars, whereas I tend to look at it more as a honeycomb, and looking at how all of those cells interact and how they're interdependent on each other. So really where I'm now working is sort of like that C-suite and with executive teams to really sort of shine a light on the two sides and how the whole is greater than the individuals. Because I think we're seeing a lot of leaders now that are turning up and they're half themselves. They're one
Mm.
person at home and they're one person in the boardroom. We
Mm.
see the leadership team that are looking up to their leaders and going, why can't you make a decision? Can't you see what's going on here? And the
Mm.
leaders by the same time are going, well, why don't these people talk to me? I think because everyone's so sort of focused now on just that one sort of, I guess,
Mm.
lens, as opposed to looking more on the peripheral, because we
Mm.
really keep just putting band-aid fixes on things.
Mm.
Um, and that's what tends to be the case. It's very short-term band-aid fixes without getting to the root cause. And like if I look at someone that's coming into the military, for argument's sake, we've got one system that looks after the recruiting, and then we've got another system once they put the uniform on, and then we've got the Department of Veteran Affairs and etc. that look after them once they've got out. The
Mm.
one common thread that runs through all of those is the individual. So how we hold that person prior to joining, so that they know what they're in for, and protect them and going, is this going to be the right fit? Because that individual coming into a system like the military, they've got the family dynamics, they've got all of those, the biases and the values that have been imparted onto them before they've joined. If that comes out of alignment once they're in the military, then we've got to see what needs to be adjusted. Is it that they're not the right fit anymore, or has the system changed that person so that they can't even recognize themselves anymore? And then
Mm.
when they come out, that we've actually got the systems to be able to hold them, rather than what you're seeing on media, and all you've got to do is look on social media or on the news, and it's depressing.
Mm.
Last week I went and worked for, volunteered at one of our shelters. It's basically for serving meals, and the amount of people that are DV victims, and that, or the
Mm.
homelessness, and they're saying that they can't keep up with demand.
Wow.
And like, I know when I went across to New York, people sort of warned me and said, look, the homelessness in New York's going to be very confronting. Yet when I came home, I actually saw more homeless than I did when I was in New York, so
Yeah.
in Sydney. And
Mm.
that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And I know them have basically got the sign, and they've got a picture of them in a like in their old uniform. So
Mm.
we can't just keep sort of shunning away from it, but
Mhm.
there has to be a way to start fixing these. And I think because I've been inside a system and outside a system, I've got that
Yeah.
two views. I'm not there to criticize, as going, well, let's recognize it
Mhm.
and accept it, and then move on and let's do something about it.
Yeah, this seems like a universal problem. I can definitely say here in the US, especially in San Diego and Los Angeles, especially, the homelessness has skyrocketed. And I don't know, of course, the statistics of our veterans, but I do know we have several out there that never got the help that they needed. Um, and it's incredibly unfortunate. And yeah, it's tough. And I have to tell you, I've thought many an hours about how do we solve homelessness. I really have. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one of the places here, I think it's Houston, Texas, but basically several nonprofits collaborated together to start helping with the homeless. And I believe they dropped it a huge percent. But yeah, it is heartbreaking because, this is something, like you said, you've been on both sides of it. So you get it, which really leads me to my next question is, we have a lot of women who are trying to do similar to what you did. They're getting out of something that they used to be in. Maybe they're becoming a consultant. Maybe they're doing a major transition in their life. Maybe their kids went to college or they just got divorced or, we have these kind of major transitions that I'm seeing more and more with women who are in their 40s and 50s, which is really interesting. I think part of it is the cultural paradigm is shifting. Women are starting to see themselves as more than just this one thing, right? And they're starting to really find themselves. I hear so many women who are kind of saying that they're awakening in their 40s and 50s and even 60s, and that there's a new type of becoming. They're becoming something new. So, as you've been going through all of this, and I think you've had a few evolutions of yourself, which I know I have had several evolutions of myself. I look back to when I was very young, like 23 years old, and I laugh sometimes because I'm like, wow, that was a very different version of Julie than I am now. Um, but for those women who are maybe in that evolution stage, right? Maybe they're frustrated, they're, discouraged. Can you offer some advice of when you are kind of evolving into the next version of you, something that you could share with them?
I think, oh, golly, I don't even know what version of Jacqui I'm up to now. I think I'm up to about Jacqui 4.0. Is someone that's very close to 60 now. But I think most of those, it's all about threshold moments. And I know when I went through my divorce, that was in my 40s, and it was sort of definitely one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. I still have a very good relationship with my ex-husband, and he's obviously the father of my darling son. But when we're going through that moment, I can still remember speaking to someone. They said, well, you know that you're doing one of the hardest things, because most people will use finances as argument's sake, as the excuses to why not to. So most of those moments where women are in wanting to step into that next thing, I think, you need to have support around you, because you're going to get the wobble. It's sort of like a moment where you doubt yourself and going, oh yeah, who am I to think that I do deserve more? Because you start to sound like you're being selfish or ungrateful for what you have in your life. And that's sort of one of the things. And I know actually too, when I went through a divorce, it was almost like it was a breakup with friends as well, because they were struggling.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how can we be friends with you and friends with your ex? We've got to pick sides. And this, I think, is fundamental to everything I'm doing at the moment. It's all about the whole, and I mean WHOLE, not HOLE, because you've got to look at that person as a whole. And I think a lot of women need to come back to themselves. It's very easy to get into that throwing money at coaches or says I, but at coaches or consultants, or to look for the answers externally, whereas I think you really need to give yourself a bit of space and the grace to actually come back home and listen to yourself, because inherently you've got the answers. You're smart women, you've been around, and if you actually start piecing, I've just got goosebumps. If you start piecing together all of the little dots along your life's journey to that point, you'll start to see the connections, and you're going, now, that starts to make sense. And really, I think if you give yourself the space and the grace, and be kind to yourself when you're going through those transitions, because you definitely deserve it. I think we lose our identity. You become someone's wife, and you become, I'm Mrs. someone, or I'm someone's mum. I even had a shirt that I still wear proudly at times, that had on the back of it Liam's mum, because that's that's who people call me. Oh, you're Liam's mum.
Yeah.
It wasn't Jacqui. They always led with you're somebody's mother. So I think that's sort of part of that fascination, but it's also to I like to use the analogy of a backpack, and the people over your life, you've got the backpack and you've put things in there that you've put in, and then you've put in other stuff that's somebody else's. So I always like doing the backpack audit to go at those threshold moments and go, well, all right, let's look at what I've been carrying around and how much is that for me to carry forward, and how much is that for me to just take out and leave, so I've got space to be able to add in new stuff. And when I was speaking on cruise ships a couple of times, I've had some ladies sort of write to me afterwards and going, you know how you sort of gave me that spark? I've gone back to show jumping again, because they thought that their time for doing that had come and gone. They go, oh, it's too late for me to do that. Whereas if you look at, say, the Harry Potter books, imagine if she'd sort of said, oh, I'm too old to do this.
Yeah. I love that.
Fascinating thing.
And you said some great things. One, being kind to yourself. I think as women, we're our worst critics, and we are probably the toughest on ourselves, especially because we're all overachievers. You're an overachiever, and that's not a bad thing because, you know, of everything you've done. But we're our worst critics. I mean, I often look in the mirror and I'm like, ugh, I think I'm looking old. You know, oh, my body's not what it was when it was 23, you know. And I really have to work hard at being proud of the wrinkles, being proud of the whatever it is that I've gone through to get there. So I think you're so right. Being kind to yourself during these transitions in our lives. Another thing is you mentioned identity. And I'll tell you, I myself and many other women, right, as we were switching industry where we had that identity crisis, it was like, who am I? You know, and I really had to work to just have an identity in myself. Like you said, we're moms, we're wives, we're businesswomen, but like if all that is stripped away, what are we really? And I think that's important that we can sit with ourselves and be okay with that. But I also think that's really hard because that is the identity that is given to women. And it's not a bad identity. I love being a mom. I'm happy being a wife. But at the same time, you know, knowing that I am so secure in myself and happy with what I am. And so you hit on some excellent points that I think are so important for women who are transitioning. And I love too that you said sit with yourself. Like don't go out and go get a business coach or a life coach right away. Sit with yourself. And I think that's important because there's a lot of noise. And I know for me, like when I was trying to climb the top, everyone was like, do this, do this, do this. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. And I got to the top. But when I got there, I sat down and I was like, this is not what I wanted. This is what everyone else said I should go do because that's part and parcel of what the expectation is of me. And that was a real epiphany moment of me going like, okay, hold on. This is what everyone wanted for me. But I never asked myself, is this what I actually wanted? And so that was a real epiphany for me of that. And I love they say, in fact, Jackie, I don't think I've heard anyone say that before. I've heard lots of people say, go get mentors, go get coaches, but you said just sit with yourself. So for those of you listening right now, probably one of the best pieces of advice I've heard in a very long time. I love that. That's powerful. I know we're coming towards the end of our podcast, and I want to make sure we highlight a couple things. You're working on a couple books. Well, you've been in the Hear Us Roar series. You're in the Hear Us Roar series with Karen Weaver, which I know is not out yet, but we will make sure to post just the link to the Hear Us Roar series so that way they can get access to that. I think you said you're working on writing another book right now. And of course, we have wrangled you in for our anthology. So you'll be writing in that as well, our anthology with the title of Honor, which I'm so excited for. But anything you want to say about your book that you're currently working on?
The book that I'm currently on, the working title at the moment is Before Force, which, it's a little bit, it's bringing together, I think, all of the lessons that I've learnt, because I'm a big believer of just because I've done things the hard way doesn't mean that somebody else has to.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yes, you need to find your own answers, and picking up on what I was just sort of saying, I wish I'd actually hate to think if I went through the exercise as to how many hundreds of thousands of dollars I've invested in other people to tell me the answers that I inherently knew. But I think it's also about, people often will use the term, I was forced to. And I think this is bringing back that sovereignty and that agency to go, at what point did you stop being an adult? We're not kids anymore, and as we don't need to necessarily get permission from other people, we need to get permission from ourselves. And I think that's where drawing out on all of the lessons I've sort of learnt the way, so that we're not forced into something when we keep that choice for ourselves.
I love that. And it's interesting when you said the permission piece, right? And it does seem, and I am gonna call out the ladies on this because I see this much more with ladies than men. Guys just go do it. They don't care. They're like, yeah, fine, I'm gonna go do it. But women oftentimes are waiting for someone to give them permission. And I remember the moment that I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it and ask for forgiveness later if they're not happy with me. And I remember the moment that I just switched over because I kept thinking like, God, I'm waiting. No one's giving me permission. Finally, I was like, you know what? Forget this. I'm just going to do it. It was incredibly freeing and I didn't get in trouble and it was fine and everything was good. So I love that you talk about giving yourself permission, being kind to yourself. I also love that you said, not love that you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on other people telling you what you knew, but I love that you said you knew it. You just had to figure it out, right? So such important lessons to learn here. So I'm really excited for your book. So when your book comes out, you definitely need to let us know so we can post that. Also, hopefully I don't know if you're going to be in New York or not, but we're doing a big book signing in New York. That we'll be doing in November 14th for those of you listening. And then we're going to do a mega book signing in the end of March at our stadium event, our 5,000 women stadium event. You can find all of that on leadempowerher.com. And so we're really excited. You can catch Jacqui on LinkedIn under Jacqui Bryant. And your Instagram is Jacqui B, JACQUIB _official. Make sure it's official because she is official. And she has more stuff coming as well, but those are great ways to connect with her. Of course, you can always message me. I will get you to Jacqui as well. But I love everything you're doing, Jacqui. We're so excited that you are part of this. And we're going to see a lot of amazing stuff happen this year. And any last words that you want to give to any of the women?
I'm just, like, to all your listeners, Julie, I am just so grateful to have had this opportunity. And I think if the one message sort of to take away is just, as I said, go back into yourself. Going back into yourself. Your heart knows the way. And it's often that our head is what sort of detracts from it.
Awesome. I love it. Well, as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.
Thanks for watching the She CEO podcast. Don't forget to smash that bell icon and don't forget to like and subscribe.